Hi, everyone. Welcome once again to Restitch America. I'm your host, Ohene-Opare, and I'm very excited to be here with you today. And today we have a really special guest for you. So before we introduce our guest today, I want you to not forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Restitch America to be notified when new content is available. Also, be sure to connect to our guests, and you can find all the information for our guests in the description below the videos. So go ahead, like and subscribe to Restitch America and help us bring more of this content to you. So our guest today is Kawon Warfield. And we're going to start off by giving you a little backstory into who he is. Kawon is an ex-Democrat who learned the truth about leftism in college and became a conservative. He is Christian before anything else and allows God to guide him through politics. He has been making conservative content on TikTok for almost 2 years and is now diving into the podcast space with his new show, The Vision, on YouTube. Kawon is also the owner of a company called Warfield Arms, which supports the creation of new firearm products he designs himself. He is an engaged and active participant in fighting against the destruction of the nuclear family, the war on fathers and mothers, and traditional Western values. He believes that too often people tend to see the headlines and run with whatever narrative is popular. Kawon wants to help people look deeper into issues and see a truer and better vision, not only for this country, but for themselves. So welcome, Kawon Warfield.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And I just wanted to give a little bit of a backstory. So we had a guest that was scheduled to be our guest for this week. And due to some scheduling difficulties, we were not able to have that guest. And so the guest is the one who actually recommended that we speak to Kawon. And I was very surprised that as soon as we reached out to him, he was ready and willing to jump on and come on with us. So I'm really excited to have him today. I've learned a little bit about him. I had a great conversation with him over the weekend. And so here he is, and I'm hoping that you guys are going to enjoy this episode so much. So Kawon, one of the things we'd like to do on the show when people come on is to have some icebreakers to get you kind of going. So here are 2 icebreakers for you. First one, if you could have a coffee with any historical figure, who would you choose?
I think it's the most obvious answer, Jesus Christ.
Ooh, wow.
The most famous historical figure in all of existence.
Okay. Give me a little more. Like
Look, listen, if I had the chance to sit down with the Messiah in the flesh, why wouldn't I? Like the Jews know him, the Christians know him, the Muslims hate him a little bit here and there. But yeah, like people didn't think that he was not real. Like, he wasn't the person we think he is. But no, we have thousands and thousands of documents saying that he was real. Thousands of eyewitnesses. I would love to sit down and talk with him in the flesh. That would be fantastic.
Do you have a question that you would love to ask him? If you could ask one question, what would that be?
I would ask him, what is my skill that I can use to help bring people to him?
Wow.
I think I have a great idea about what I can do, but I don't know what I should be doing. I try to lean on him as much as possible, but there's always that little bit of uncertainty if I'm doing the right kind of thing for him. And so I was want to hear his advice as far as how do I bring more people towards him.
Thank you. Wow, that is, I think, very inspiring, and I appreciate that you brought that up. I am a Christian as well, and I would love an opportunity to sit with the Savior of the world. and I love what you said about wanting to know your role in the whole process, right? And so this is not the, what can you do for me? It's more, what can I do for you? And I love that about that answer. All right, so the next question is, what is the best compliment you have ever gotten?
This was hard for me because, as you know, as men, we don't get a ton of compliments in today's world. So I was thinking back in my bed, like, hey, when was that? Was like that one time? Okay, I think what it was, I was on vacation, and I heard this group of young ladies talking, and someone mentioned God. I'm like, oh, that's my opportunity to come in and talk with them and chime in and say, oh, what do you guys know about God? And I'm like, what's going on here? And we're all chatting and talking. And one of the young ladies, she was having guy troubles, and she was kind of having a hard time finding a good guy to a good guy for her. So we're kind of chatting and talking, kind of going over what God says a good man is. And we're talking for a while. She goes, you know what? You seem like a good Christian guy. You seem like a man of God. And I'm like, wow, thank you. That's the best compliment I could ever get in my life.
That is cool. Yeah, that is really awesome. Okay, so we know you a little bit.
A little bit,
So
just a little
let's
bit.
jump in to our discussion for today. So one in the intro, we
Hmm.
described you as an ex-Democrat. And so I want to understand a little bit, first, how did you become a Democrat?
Hmm.
And then what caused you to switch into where you are today?
So I remember this very clearly. It was 2007, around the October area where we we kind of going into that Obama stage of him going to be elected as president. And my class had a little mock election. We went over both candidates and kind of read their biographies. And I went home. I'm like, hey, mom, who are you voting for president? She goes, of course, Obama. I'm like, oh, okay, why? She goes, well, I'm Democrat, and kind of goes into her little speech about it. And I'm like, okay, cool. So if my mom's Democrat, then I'm Democrat as well. Like I love my mom. She's my person who raised me. I'm gonna go with her gut on this. And so for the rest of my life until like college, I just said, you know what? My mom's Democrat, so am I. And so I kind of took after her views.
How old were you when that happened in
I
2007?
Yeah, I was actually 7 years old.
Okay.
So I was a little kid, and I was like, okay, my mom is very intelligent. She's very well educated. I'm gonna go with her on this.
Okay. It's interesting that you were interested in politics at that age, and I don't think you're different from most people, right? You know, we grow up in a home, and the values that we're taught, those are the values we usually, cling to,
Yeah.
and the kind of labels that we're brought up with, those are the labels that we usually inherit until something happens that shakes us from that initial core. So
Hmm.
tell me about that transformation.
So I believe so. I was a freshman in college, and I had joined ROTC. So I was around a ton of Army dudes, a majority of my time at college. And there's a certain point where we had to do firearm training. And I was always taught that firearms are bad. You don't do any of that kind of stuff. No one owns a gun. I had never really seen a gun in my life. I think my uncle and my mom had one, but like put away. It wasn't something she showed people or like talked about. Um, Guns was just not a big thing. And even now, my mom is very uncomfortable that I have a gun. Um, but yeah, I was doing that, and then I ended up doing some shooting testing. I really enjoyed it, so I decided to get my own gun. And so when I was doing that, I decided to do my own research and kind of look into the gun laws, look into background checks, look into how that kind of works, look into like mass shootings, all that kind of stuff. And I started going down this rabbit hole and realizing, huh, all the things I was told about like mass shootings, about gun control was all wrong, was all lies. All my friends were telling me like, oh yeah, these crazy right wing nuts with guns, though all of those stories were just weren't true. So it's like, okay, if I was wrong about guns for all these years, what else am I wrong about? And so it just went deeper and deeper and deeper. And over time, I just one by one, view by view, I realized I actually had a different opinion about things.
Interesting. And I realize you use the word rabbit hole, right?
Yes.
And that's an idiomatic expression that we use to represent kind of, spiraling into a particular thing. But the thought that came to my mind as you said that was, what if we stop calling it a rabbit hole? Because
Hmm.
it has a little bit of a negative connotation. What if we call it an enlightenment hole, right? You jumped into this enlightenment hole where you started thinking for yourself and started questioning the
Hmm.
assumptions that you had made in the past. And then immediately, as you begin to do that, you get a piece, a nugget, and that nugget leads you to the next nugget, and you continue spiraling into enlightenment, right?
Yeah,
And then that brings you to this point.
exactly. And like it comes from the book, Alice in Wonderland, she's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like she's living in this posh rich society where she's supposed to like marry a certain kind of guy and just a certain kind of way, and then like she falls into this little rabbit hole and things get turned upside down. There's like fruits and foods that are going to change your size and shape, and there's like Eva Queen. It's a whole different kind of world that she didn't know about, and so I think absolutely. I think we talk about like red pilling or like
Mm-hmm.
the rabbit hole, and I think it's kind of more so. It's kind of say when you go from seeing in black and white to seeing in color, it's just a whole new kind of vibrant world out
Perspective.
there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so you go to college, and which college was this?
I went to Indiana University.
Okay, so normally people go to college and they actually become more left,
Yep.
left leaning. And so, how come your experience was different?
So honestly, my college is extremely liberal. It's no different from any other college. I know like most professors are extremely liberal. I think I got a bunch of bad grades on papers because they were more conservative and not liberal enough, actually. I think what was different though was I think I was always a conservative thinker who
Mhm.
just was convinced that he was a Democrat.
So
And
you
so
were a conservative trapped in a Democrat's body.
exactly, I had to I had to transition from my old self to my new self, and so to speak. And I think the evidence for this is when I was in school, we would have debates, and even though that was liberal, and I was talking to my liberal friends, we would always end up on like different parts of the discussion, and I would quote unquote speak like a conservative. I'm like, well, the facts don't say that. Like, and I just found like I was different than my like liberal friends were, and so I think that's kind
Okay.
of why it's like how I think is more logical, and I think I was going for the facts, and I realized going into college that the facts was not on their side of the argument.
Okay, so I want to dive a little deeper into this. So
Mm-hmm.
you are saying that the difference that you saw between your liberal friends and you was this kind of logical thinking.
Yeah.
So what would you say for the liberal person listening to this? How would you describe what you think is their way of thinking?
I think that they are very, very compassionate people, more so than the average person. I think if you are a true liberal, if you're a true like someone on the more so on the left, not in the middle, you are exceptionally compassionate. You want more than nothing in the world to have people feel included and to kind of understand what someone else is feeling. And you do it to such a degree that you will deny the truth so that their truth can be heard more.
Interesting.
And it's again like I haven't ill to this. I think it's very admirable to kind of want that for people. It's like they want this kind of utopia. It's like yes, your dreams can be true, and like anything anything you wish for can happen. I'm like yes, that is a nice fairy tale when we're kids, but as you grow older, that doesn't really work. So it's a nice kind of feeling to have when you're young. It's nice kind of idealism to kind of have and like hope in like this kind of like dark and bleak world. But it just doesn't work out long term. And so I think that they're very nice people. I think that they have big hearts. I just think it doesn't really lend itself to viewing the actual truth. The truth is, the truth hurts. It's hard. It's not always convenient. It's not always comfortable. And I think they want to avoid that as much as possible for this like more ideal world.
Okay, I like that, and that's kind of how I feel as well. Is that I don't. A lot of people start these conversations by ascribing like a nefarious motive to
Yeah.
people's beliefs, and I don't think so at all. I think, like you said, a lot of people are compassionate and they want a better world. They genuinely do. And just like you said, the question is how do we get there, and
Mm-hmm.
what are the realities that we have to face in the process of getting there, right? And we can't just wish our problems away. We can't just wish human nature away. We have to
Yeah.
look at the realities on the ground, and sometimes it's painful, or sometimes we have to choose paths that are not ideal in the ideal sense, in a perfect world
Mm-hmm.
sense. It's not ideal. However, that is the best way to get to the other side of the river, right? And sometimes it's a little difficult, I think, just as you said, for them to grasp that we can't change everybody. You can't
Yeah.
change people, and people are going to be selfish. And if you believe that you can change people, then you are going into a realm that will require authoritarianism to achieve. And that's where a lot of these leftist ideals end you in those realms, because if you believe you can change people uh, on a mass scale, then it's going to take a lot of force to do that. Okay, so thank you for sharing that. Now, you go, let's continue the story from there. So you are in college, you start having these discussions, you realize I'm finding myself on the opposite side of my friends. And do your friends begin to see that as well? And do they start to call you, a conservative at that point?
So so at first I did it in secret. So like I would secretly post to my account, and under a new name and email, like certain kind of memes and certain kind of like images, and like be a conservative online, but like not in public necessarily. So like, if you ask me about it, I'll tell you about it, but like I wasn't really like out there gonna out myself in public.
It's funny that all the language the language of today fits all. You're in the closet as a closet conservative. and so you had to tread carefully, because it changes your life when you come out conservative,
and
right?
Like, especially in college too, because like I said, I did a paper, and my paper was the same topic as everybody else, but I did it from a conservative point of view, and I immediately got a failing grade from the teacher, and like the teacher was very openly more conservative. Sorry, not conservative, more liberal. And I even had a different teacher where I was the only one questioning her. I was the only one asking questions and like defining kind of what she was kind of saying. She was my sociology teacher, which was a very liberal class. But like in a room of 200 kids, I was the only one questioning what she was saying. So it was very obvious that I was the person who's kind of odd one out. But yeah, it's very very difficult because in college it feels like you are literally the only one.
Yeah.
There's no club for it. No one's like out and about kind of shouting it out loud. But one day I decided to get over myself, saying, "Hey, isn't that a big deal? You have your beliefs." So I actually wore a Trump hat to school one day.
Wow. Now
I said, "You know what? I'm going in. I'm going in."
In the world today, that is, I mean, wearing a hat, you would never think wearing a hat is brave, but in a world today, wearing a particular kind of hat is actual bravery now.
Yeah, to my surprise, I'm like, well, like, listen, if people are out there in like the world like going in camps because they want to shout out their religion, then I can wear a hat. It's okay. I figured it out. I can handle these college kids who like like who like don't pay rent. It's okay.
So you wore the hat. What was the response?
So it was bewilderment. It was a lot of bewilderment. So I can notice that like people were looking at me. People were kind of like talking among themselves to the side, and it was kind of like I was wearing like a toaster on my head. He was just like, is that real? Is that fake? One guy thought it was fake. He goes, "Oh man, funny hat, it's fake hat." I'm like, "No, it's a real hat." He goes, "Oh," and he walks away. And so one of my friends he goes, "Hey Kawon, no man, I just can't support what you're doing right here, man." I'm like, "That's fine. It's just what I believe in." He goes, "Yeah, man, you get out of here, go." And he was really upset. I'm like, "That's really, okay, cool. I understand, man. You have your beliefs, whatever." And we moved on. And me and him aren't friends anymore. I still wish him goodwill and everything. But yeah, he just wasn't having it.
Wow. So you come out
Come out.
with your red hat, and you get all this response from it. So now it's obvious that you're a Black kid
Yes.
from Indiana. And so did that play into any of the response you got? And then also, how did your family find out about it, and how did they take it?
Yeah. So it played. So I think for me, being a Black conservative, I think it played itself in two ways. I think white conservatives were so happy to see me. And something you notice is that when you wear like a provocative hat or shirt, is that people will like walk up to you and like hey man, like walk up to you like on the side like, "Hey man, nice hat." Like they're like, "Hi," like, "Hey, by the way, I love your shirt," whatever. People will like come up to me in public and be like, "Hey man, I like what you're doing. But like, no, don't tell anybody. It's like this very, very interesting response. Like, people were like afraid to like, speak their mind, but they would have to see me doing it. So it's kind of like very interesting in that regard. But then the opposite side was people all of a sudden felt very, very comfortable with telling me how I should think. A lot, a
Interesting.
lot, a lot of liberals went from, "Hey, you should speak your voice," to, "Hey, shut up. You used to be thinking, wow, what I think."
Interesting. I've never seen it put in that kind of succinct way. They went from speak your voice, speak your truth, to sorry, you can't think this. You
Yeah,
can't think that
you're
way.
done.
That's
You want to think,
interesting.
and I will say it wasn't too much of a difference because growing up, I was always told that I'd speak whitely, or like I don't act black, or whatever that means, and that always bothered me. But they're like, "Yeah, you don't act black." I'm like, "What does that mean?" They go, "Well, you talk a certain kind of way." I'm like, "How do?" I'm like, "Well, I'm like, how do black people talk?" And they go, "Well, they use this kind of words." I'm like, "So because I use longer words, I'm not black." It's really degrading, and like it's really weird. And it's like always from like the liberals, like, "Oh, you like, hey man, you don't talk like you should talk." I'm like, you are kind of helping out the problem that you're saying, like, you were trying to fight. It's kind of weird. Um, but I think for my family, in particular, my mom, it bothered her. I think what happened was I was like, "Hey mom, I need to talk to you." She goes, "Oh my gosh, are you a Satanist, gay Republican?" And I was like, "One out of three of those." I'm like, where did you go to all three of those? But one out of three of those. You're close, mom. You're close.
That is funny.
Yeah, like, "Mom, I still love God. I still love women." Um, but I gotta say, I like Trump. She goes, "Oh, I can't." She hates Trump. She cannot stand the man. Like, you saying his name is like acid to her. She absolutely hates the man. And I think she hated that more than she hated me being a conservative. But I think she wanted me to be my own man. I think she supported that. Say, "Hey, Kawon, you are a smart kid. You can kind of decide what you want to decide." I think you're wrong in a lot of ways, but you are your own man. So I do love her for that. She's very, very, very supportive of me as far as my intellectual journey. I think other family members came out of the woodwork saying, "Hey, Kawon, we're also on your side as well," which is kind of cool. But then there's of course a lot of family who's like, "Hey, don't ever talk to me ever again."
Oh, really?
I've gotten a lot of arguments online, like, "Hey, don't even come by our house anymore. Don't
Oh,
don't buy
wow.
me anywhere."
Wow, that is crazy. I've heard about, Trump actually being a lightning rod in family relationships, and I've never really spoken to someone who has actually lost, family members to to that, pushback on Trump. Now I know, and this is my take on Trump. Trump has flaws,
Yeah,
and unfortunately, his flaws are available for everybody to see. And I heard this a while back that has always stuck with me. And it says when you see someone who has a lot of visible flaws, like you have the tendency, or people have the tendency to look at that person and point to all their flaws, right? And and this man said he was driving one day and he saw this guy driving in a Subaru. He had all these stickers all over the car, and then he also had all these tattoos and piercings and things. And as he's driving, he comes to the back of the car and he sees a sticker that says, "Don't judge me because I sin differently than you do." And I was like,
yep,
that's exactly the world, right? We see Trump, we see all his flaws, and we look at him and we say, well, my flaws are hidden. Nobody knows my flaws. And so I have the right to go and point to somebody else and point out their mistakes and their issues. But all we're doing is you're judging people because they sin differently than you do.
yeah,
Right. And so I've always looked at myself as that. There's certain things I wish Trump didn't do. There's
yeah.
certain things I
I agree.
wish he didn't say. There's certain mannerisms and demeanors that he has that I feel could be used in a better way, to unite a little more.
Yeah,
However, I understand that he is his own man, and I have to play whatever part I can play to achieve the kind of world I want to see.
yeah,
And to the extent that he is helping move that goal forward, I can support him when he is,
Yep.
right? And that's kind of how I've always looked at it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think what the left does as a disservice, and I think why they kind of lost to Trump back in 2016, was that they did not understand his appeal. They only looked at his negatives, and then they realized that yes, we also see his negatives as well, but also we see his good as well. And I think it's that's kind of true with like any kind of candidate. You say what is their flaws and what is their kind of win, so to speak. And for a lot, and like for a lot of politicians, their flaws are kind of in the dark. You don't find out until it's too late. I think with Trump, you kind of know what's up. We've seen him for the past like 30, 40 years in like public view. He's been on like TV shows and all the kind of different kind of stuff. We know who Trump is for the most part. We know what he's done wrong most of his life. There are all of his behaviors are baked into the cake, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's like, okay, this guy is obviously bad in certain kind of ways, but also he has a lot of good to offer. And it's more like I know what I'm getting with Trump versus I don't know what I'm getting with everybody else.
That is so true. In Ghana, we used to say, the devil you know is better than the angel you don't know. Right. And so in politics, a lot of times you're presented with angels that you don't know,
Yeah.
because they curate the background of these people. They clean them up, they get them on the campaign stage, they tell them what to say, and they come out polished and angelic, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the devil, right? The person who is in the public view, who has taken all the slings and arrows, who has done all those things that might be good and bad and so on. But many times in life, you find that the person even if they're imperfect, is usually better than the angel you don't know,
Yeah. And
because
like
you never
I
know what they're capable of.
Yeah, and I think that's part of his appeal is that even though he's a billionaire, we can still all kind of like kind of relate to him. Like he speaks and way he talks, like yeah, he's a billionaire, but also I say those things, like I did those things, or like I'm I'm not wasting time, so whatever. Like he feels so relatable, even though that he's so like wealthy, versus like all these other elites are so beyond us. Like and like they put on these facades of like no, yeah, we are perfect. It's like we can't really actually relate to that. Because like you said, we
Exactly.
all sin sin in like different ways, and Trump kind of shows like, yeah, I'm a human being, I mess up, I am one of you guys.
That is so true. And as you were just saying that, a thought that came to my mind was this, which is, can I imagine myself sitting with Nancy Pelosi eating a burger from McDonald's? I can't, that image doesn't compute in my head, right? It doesn't compute. One, she will not be at McDonald's.
Yeah,
She's not the everyday person. Like, she may love me, she may love, the country and everything, but I can't relate, right? I can't relate. But just like you said, in spite of the fact that Trump is wealthy, has his own plane, right? And everything, you still can feel that related, he's relatable.
mm-hmm.
Even and that, I believe, is very difficult to do. A lot of people, when they have money, they become different people. Even people who were poor in the beginning, when they get money, they change, and they begin to look down on the people around them. And so the fact that he's able to still maintain this sense of, I am with you, I'm on the same level with you, I think that's a quality that is very hard to replicate in anyone.
Yeah,
And that's why I think he still has a lot of influence and support. I don't know how it's all going to shake out in the end for 2024, but I'm here for it. This would be my very first time to vote in a
hey,
presidential election in 2024. So I'm here for it. I'm excited to see how it all shakes out. All right, so let's move on to something else. Let's talk about the country. So you
mm-hmm.
started posting on social media a couple of years ago, and you started kind of delving more and more into politics. So what are the political issues that you feel are pressing for the country? What are the issues and topics that you feel need attention and need more people like you to talk about them?
I think overall the issue is culture. I think a lot of Republicans like to go on stage and say, "Oh, taxes," or "Oh, like roads," like "Oh, we like these like different kind of platitudes." And that's been like the kind of thing for the past 30 years. And yes, we all like guns and we all like taxes, and those are good talking points. But like at this point, we are not talking about just money. It's not about money anymore. I feel. I think we are far beyond money at this point. We are to a point where we are no longer a united culture. Unlike other countries, which are like connected by religion, by race, by geography, it's to some degree. America was started based on beliefs. You don't have to all have the same skin tone, the same same like kind of religion going on. We all have the same kind of belief in our constitution and what that stands for. So in that way, anybody can become American at any time, as long as you prescribe to those beliefs. Unfortunately, we have started to attack our own documents as far as the Constitution goes and as far as our Bill of Rights. Unfortunately, we have decided to stop taking care of our own borders anymore, so anybody can come in at any time. And we have started to divide ourselves and say, hey, we are going to all believe in these different cultures and these different kind of things, and we won't have anything in common anymore because we're all individuals who's happen to be on the same continent. And I think if we keep going down that path, there's nothing for us to fix anymore because we aren't a country anymore. Because the only thing that made us a country was our culture.
And this is actually, I think, very profound. We've talked about being united as, states in the union, but I've not heard this characterization you just made, which is we're no longer a united culture, right? We're no longer looking at the same thing and having the goals around the same kind of issues. And I think that's really profound. And that's a tragedy, I believe, that is born out of this idea that and this is something you brought up in the beginning, because we care so much about individuals and their culture and their background and so on and so forth, we're saying that those things should reign supreme to the detriment of that universal culture. So when people come here, usually in the past, we would say they need to assimilate to the culture. They need to embrace our ideals around freedom of speech, around our Second Amendment, and around all sorts of things. But now we're saying, no, no, no. Everything is valuable. Everything is just as valuable. If you choose to live this way, that's fine. If you choose to live that way, that's fine. And what that means is now we're creating groups and niches of people who don't have anything in common. And when we don't have anything in common, it's so much easier for conflict to brew when you don't have anything in common.
Yeah.
And especially when you begin to live off of characterizations of the other side that are completely fabricated in a lot of situations. So I love the fact that in the beginning you said that, you saw Democrats as people who were very compassionate, right? I love that so much because you didn't go to these people hate America. Oh, these people, want to see our America destroyed. Now, there are some elements that actually want the fundamental restructuring of our country based on some other principles. However, the vast majority of people are not on that lane, right? Most of them just want a better society, a nicer society, a safer society. And where we disagree is how we get there. And so the name of this podcast is Restitch America, because the goal is let's find the things that actually unite us and bring those things to the fore. And our culture is one of those things that need to be rekindled in a way that begins to reunite the country. So I love that you brought that up. Now, what do you feel are those challenges to bringing or creating this universal culture?
I think people like to believe that politics is downstream of culture. That if we all kind of live a certain kind of way, then all of politics will fall in place. I think that's true in part, but I think the other part is that politics actually do influence culture as well. That how you live, the actions you actually take in real life affect how you believe and how you feel, how you think. And so I think what we've kind of done is saying, you know what, we don't need to do the Pledge of Allegiance every morning. We actually don't need to fly our flags. We actually don't need to do all these different things. We actually don't all need to speak English anymore. We actually don't all need to read our constitution documents anymore. and we changed to how we kind of lived our lives, and that that changed, that changed our mindsets and our culture. And I think I'm tired of people kind of saying we need to start doing this culture war and like kind of change the way we think. I'm like, absolutely, that's fine, that's totally fine, that's true. But at the same time, we need to start putting into law new ways of living, going back to the kind of how we kind of lived our lives. It's like when I said, hey, we should also all take off Sunday so that we all go to church. That was a good law that was in place. I believe personally. But like I think the government should start putting in laws that actually change how we live our lives so that we can start living in that culture instead of just waiting for it to happen naturally.
Yeah, that's where I would, break a little bit from your perspective in that sense. And the reason I do that is because once again, the question is, I don't necessarily have a problem with certain laws and things, but I always like to think beyond the person putting in that law.
Mm-hmm.
So if you gave someone the power to control something like that, the question is not so much whether you like what the person is doing with that power. It's about who comes next and what can they use that power for. And so, and that's why conservatives in general, we believe a lot in the limited powers of the government, such that you don't have the person who comes next, who is much worse than the person that you support today. And so it's going to be very difficult to have a system where we make a law and then the next person comes and reverses the whole thing, and then we go and become a teeter-totter type regime where everything shifts every 4 years radically. And so my thought around fixing the culture is going back to principles and teaching those principles, not necessarily in a form of a law that is enforced by the gun, but to teach and reintroduce those principles into our cultural spaces, right? And so, for instance, if someone came to you and said, hey, I have reinvented the idea of family. So now family is going to be people who care about each other, but they all live in different places. Mother, father live in different places. They just come together if they need to have a baby, and then they go and live in different places. Now, that would be a fundamental destruction of the idea of family, right? And what we need to be able to do is to speak to that and say, this idea is not going to create the same outcomes of two people living in a home together with their children, caring for their children together. And that's what I think is happening to our culture, is that we're coming up with these ideas around how to do different things, and we're assuming that we will get the same results. And we are looking back at millions of years or thousands of years of history and saying, oh, this didn't matter. Somehow we, in our limited knowledge, can come up with a new way to do the family. And somehow it's going to end up in the same place. And we're seeing this kind of destruction of the family. And I know this is one of the things that you have been focused on, is talking about family. And so do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
So yeah, so to kind of bring it back to the point before, and as well tie in family, the problem I have with like the idea that we shouldn't make laws because it's going to teach each other in between is that the left is already making laws. They are already pushing that kind of down our throats. So I was like, us saying we aren't doing anything on that front doesn't really stop them from doing
That's true.
what they're doing. Inch by inch, day by day, they have pushed and pushed and pushed. It used to be, hey, we shouldn't, it used to be gay marriage. Now it's transing kids. They have pushed it so far to the left because we say, well, we don't want to make any laws. And I think we kind of think it's like, oh, if we make laws and we are, not as good as them, it's like, no. If we make laws that kind of push an idea, then people start to line up with that as well. It's like with family, like family. Right now, it's really easy to get divorced. Back in the day, it wasn't easy. It was not that easy at all to get divorced back in the day. And so if we make laws that say, yeah, we should make it harder and harder to get divorced and make people take it more seriously, I think that will actually help marriages. Personally, so I kind of feel about that. It's not necessarily saying that we have to force people to do a certain kind of thing, but saying, hey, we're going to put in emphasis on certain kind of desirable outcomes with power with the power that we have, so that we can kind of push culture in, like, in a certain kind of way. I think
And
any culture should have standards.
exactly. And I generally agree with where we want to be.
Hmm.
However, in order to make something a law, right, you need to have the people behind that idea. And so we need to speak to the culture and changing people's minds before you ever think about potentially making something a law. Otherwise, the law becomes oppressive to the people who believe that it is wrong, right?
I disagree with that because we are not a democracy. We are a
Mm-hmm.
representative republic. We don't do it by mob rule, like, 50 guys plus one. There are many people back, we can name any kind of situation where people wanted to own slaves. A good amount of people, like, millions and millions of people died to try to keep slaves. But, Abraham Lincoln was like, you know what? I don't care. It's a bad thing. I'm gonna say no to that right now. And he oppressed them in, their purview, but, they were wrong. And so the question is not necessarily, we should not be able to, not use power because it's oppressive. It's like, hey, what is right and what is wrong, and how can we use our power as a governing body to influence what is right?
And I would say the best place for your idea is what I'm seeing in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
because what Florida is doing is actually putting into law certain things that you can and cannot do that are
Yeah,
downstream from the belief in certain things. So for instance, when we say you can't have these kinds of conversations with kids from kindergarten to third grade,
yeah,
that's a law. You can't have these books that are sexually provocative and
yeah,
all these things in school libraries. That's a law. Or you can't teach this kind of divisive, doctrine
yeah,
to younger kids, in high school and so on. That's a law. So I can see what you were talking about, which is using the power that has been entrusted us by the people to
yeah,
actually enact laws that end up putting you closer to the value systems that you want to end up with. And so,
yeah. It's one of those things where, again, like, the environment that you're in changes how you think. And right now we're in this, like, leftist liberal environment where, like, the laws aren't very so tight on, like, certain turn conservative viewpoints. So we're kind of like living in these schools who teach these kind of sex ed things about, X, Y, and Z, and we're living in this society that's saying, yeah, we are allowed to say these, say and do kind of things, and that's kind of influencing the culture more than us just saying we're going to talk about it. Again, absolutely, we should talk about it. Absolutely, we should change the minds. Absolutely, we can have all the discussions possible. But part of that discussion is saying we are going to enact laws that do what is right and help people kind of sit in an environment that, helps them kind of learn.
interesting. And yeah, I don't
Yeah,
disagree.
yeah,
In
it's a balance though.
general, I think in the end we want the same thing. The question is, what is the best path, and what
Yeah,
is the path that is most likely to succeed? And what I am hoping to be able to do, and I think you're doing that as well, is to begin to speak about these things and to speak in a way that we don't antagonize the people that we want
yeah.
to listen, right? And once we do that, hopefully we can be catalysts to begin to change the minds and prepare people for a world that is different from what they have today, right?
I agree. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
And yeah, and like I said, back with family again, like, end of the day, like I said, I wish that there were certain laws in place to kind of help push forward culture, but it all starts with the family, the mom and the dad. Kind of like, with me, what you taught at home, I was taught certain things, and, like, I changed my mind about certain things. But I think we think, yep, it is the individual or it's the government. But, like, no. Society is built off the family, and I think we have really discarded that in like, recent years.
Yeah. So my producer told me you are recently engaged.
I'm engaged. Yes.
That is congratulations
Thank you.
on being engaged. And so talking about family, you are starting that journey to potentially starting a family. And so how did you propose?
How did I propose? Okay, so it's a funny story. So it was a weekend. We were going out to have dinner, or whatever, kind of like a pre-planned thing. And so I had planned us a vacation in like 2 months from now at that point. And so she was waiting for me to propose on that vacation. But I was not. I was going
Decoy.
to propose that weekend. Yeah, a decoy vacation. But anyway, so we're heading out the door to dinner or whatever. And she pats me down. She like frisks me at the door. And like I have this huge ring in in my pocket, like in a box. And she like somehow she's like misses it. She's like patting me down. She's like goes right over the ring, misses it. She goes, "Okay, you're clean." I'm like, what are you looking for? She goes, "Nothing." I'm like, she's on to me, but then, again, she didn't find the ring. And so we go out to dinner, we're hanging out, we're talking, and then I go to this light show here in Bloomington, Indiana. And we're at the light show and looking and watching, and she's like texting her friend on Snapchat, and she's like suspicious of me, and like my buddies are over there in the corner with with a camera waiting for us to propose, and she's like texting her friends, "Hey, I think he might propose to me tonight." And as she does that, hit send. I'm like right there on one knee, like, "Hey, will you marry me?" And so like we have photos of her texting her friend, "Hey, he is gonna marry me," propose today. And me on my knee like this, waiting for her to look up.
That is cool. That is awesome. So, well, I don't know if you know this about me, but I have been in March next month will be my 17th year of marriage. So I've been doing this for a little while, and so my advice for you as you get into that world, if I were to give you advice, I know it's unsolicited, but is it's being yoked together, right? Being yoked together and not seeing each other as, I have the final say. It's being yoked together and being united in your culture. Just like you said, I'm bringing back your own words, being
Culture, yeah.
united in your culture as a family, such that you can go into the world and be working towards the same goals. And as long as you do that, all the challenges that come your way, you'll be able to figure out a way to get over them. So that's my little advice.
Thank you.
All right. So last thing I wanted to ask you is, every time we speak to people on our podcast, we like to give them something to do. Let's call it some homework, because I know sometimes when we talk, a lot of people talk and nobody does anything. And so I would like to ask you if there is something that you can challenge our audience to do this coming week that you feel will be helpful either to themselves or to the cause of preserving our nation and our culture. What do you think that would be?
Next time you run into somebody who just drives you nuts, you think that they are just an absolute supervillain. They they live to destroy your life in some kind of way, whether that's at work or at a restaurant or in your family, whoever it is. I want you to your best of your ability, pretend in the moment like they have the best intentions for you. Like, imagine for a second that they love you to death, and that despite how you feel about with their actions, that they are trying their best to do the right thing. Just practice that for a second. Pretend like that mean waiter, maybe he has had a long day and he's trying to get things right for you, and he's frustrated and he's rushing, and that's why your order was messed up. He he feels really, really bad about it. And whatever's going on, try your best to kind of feel what they're living through. Try to imagine that they are trying their best for you in your life. And I think when you do that, you start to see that a lot of things that kind of make us upset are kind of pointless and useless. I think when you kind of step back and say, this is a real person, and you kind of give somebody good motives instead of a bad motive, you start to see the world in a different kind of way. It's no longer someone who's trying to destroy your way of life. It's someone who has a different opinion on how to fix the country.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And this brings us to the end of our interview today. Thank you so much, Kawon, for joining us on Restitch America. And to all our audience, you can find information about Kawon. We will put it in the description of the video. And also, if you're listening to this on the podcast, you can find the same information in the description of the podcast as well. So go connect with Kawon, support people like him who are creating new content and who are helping kind of broaden the conversation and bring different perspectives to the conversation. So support him. And then also As we've said before, go like and follow us, Restitch America, on all the social media platforms. So just search for Restitch America and you'll be able to find us there. And once again, thank you for all your support, and we will see you next week.